Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third day of the Center on KTDRR's 2014 online conference, Effective Media Outreach Strategies. My name is Kathleen Murphy. I am the Evaluation and Technical Assistance Manager for KTDRR, which is located at SEDL, or CEDL, in Austin, Texas. I'll be your moderator for the first half of today before our KTDRR PI, John Westbrook, takes the wheel. All of us at KTDRR hope you've enjoyed the first 2 days of our conference on Monday and Wednesday. I see there are some familiar names in the participant list, so welcome back. On Monday, Tim McGuire, Donna Luckett, and Sylvia Rincon all did an excellent job of providing us a thorough landscape of how to work effectively with reporters to share your research. Then 2 days ago, on Wednesday, we were talking about the use of electronic and social media. We heard from Bonnie Zink, who I think is with us again today, and Bruce Newbold. Then Michael Johnny did a presentation exploring issues relevant to thinking through the value of clear language in our writing, which is, of course, inestimable. And Mark Harness from the University of Washington introduced the group to a new KTDRR plain language summary tool. Then we broke out into 3 rooms. There was one focused on Twitter, one on Facebook, and another on YouTube and whatever other tool people wanted to discuss. So there are some presentation materials and some unedited transcripts in the expo room. If you want to kind of review what happened on the last couple of days, there's a link in the expo room. If you look at the helpful links pod, I don't know if you see it there on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. It's, let me scroll down here for you. Yeah, right here, expo room, it's the top one. So word is that some who participated on Wednesday would like to be involved in a private KT Media Facebook group. So at the end of today, when we ask you to fill out the conference evaluation, look at the last question, because that's where you can indicate your interest. And it is an anonymous evaluation, so don't forget to include your email address there so we can be in touch. Okay. If this is the first day that you're able to join us, welcome. And as those of you who've been with us earlier in the week know, we really, really could not welcome more, your questions and comments, so send them in early and often. And we have set up 5 ways for you to send them in. Some of you are already using the chat box on the left-hand side of the meeting room there. You can tweet in your question if you use the hashtag KTmedia, that's KTMEDIA. We're also taking questions via email at KTDRR at that's as in Southwest, at SEDL.org. If you'd like, you're welcome to call us, and we will have your question relayed to me. Tracy Bauman is monitoring that line for us, one of our KTDRR staff members, and that number is 1-800-266-1832. Perhaps, Ann, you could go ahead and put that in the chat pod so everyone can see that, or it's right up there on the slide, obviously. And you can also post a message on facebook.com/ktdrr.org. So a couple of other housekeeping notes. CART captioning is being provided by Caption First. The link to CART is in the helpful links pod on the lower right-hand side of your screen. We've already looked at that, right? It's right there under Expo Room. Now go look at the bottom left. There's a box with conference logistics. That's going to be there all day, and so if you have any technical problems, you can contact technical support by email, right there, connectsupport@intosolve.com, or by phone. Their phone number is 512-681-7272, extension 676. I'm going to scroll down a little bit for you here in case you don't see that. Right, no, not yet. There we go. Well, later on, there it is, over there. So we're back in helpful links now. See down there at the bottom, conference evaluation. That is a link to the conference evaluation form there, just in case you're leaving early today. We will pop it up at the end, and you'll get a message closer to 5 o'clock. But I know some of you maybe have other things to do on Halloween and may take a minute before you do go, to give us some feedback before you leave today. So let's get started. Here's our agenda today. Our focus is on disability media and KT supports. We so appreciate the people that have joined us today. They are real leaders in the world of disability media. And we know all of you are wondering, all that you've learned this week, how are you going to apply it in your own work? So once we hear from a couple of presentations from disability media experts, we will also have other experts from our own KT centers talking about their resources and activities, especially those that relate to their use of various forms of media. So the idea is we hope that hearing about their efforts motivates you to take action in your own work. But first, we are going to hear from Josie Byzek. Josie Byzek is Managing Editor and Social Media Manager for the magazine New Mobility. It's a lifestyle magazine for wheelchair users published by the United Spinal Association. Josie has been on staff with New Mobility for about 14 years. She's led the magazine's use of Facebook and Twitter. She's been seeing steady growth in the size and interaction level from readers, so she may have some tips for us. She herself can be found on LinkedIn. And today she will present from your research to our readers. So there we go.
Okay.
Take it away, Josie.
Hi, everyone. As Kathleen said, I am Josie Byzek, Managing Editor and Social Manager for New Mobility Magazine, and I'm proud to say that we are the official publication of the United Spinal Association, and that's sort of a new thing that happened. And what it means that if you are a member of United Spinal, you can get a free subscription, and it's a free membership to United Spinal, so it's a pretty good deal. And so if you haven't already, please join and become readers. As of September, we had a circulation of around 80,000, and our circulation jumped when we became a membership perk for United Spinal this past April. Some of you know the National Spinal Cord Injury Association, and they are also part of United Spinal. So this reflects our core readership as well as the memberships of our joint organizations. And to our knowledge, this means we have the largest readership of people who use wheelchairs of any publication. So we also have active social media platforms. Our Twitter page is fast approaching 5,000 followers, and Facebook should top 10,000 by 2015. So if you are looking to connect with people who use wheelchairs, we are a good place to start. Now, I'm not a graphic designer, I'm an editor. But I mocked up this cover image that you guys can see because it illustrates what research means for our readership. I want to stress, in case my boss is listening, that this is not a real New Mobility cover. But this image depicts a young man named Ian Burkhart, who is a man with quadriplegia from Dublin, Ohio, who was able to move his hand and his fingers with his thoughts using something called NeuroBridge. He's shown surrounded by the researchers from Ohio State, but he's central to the image. And this is on purpose. In fact, our logo is obscuring some of those responsible for making the NeuroBridge happen. When we first received the press release from Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, we were very pleased. Usually press releases focus on the scientific breakthrough and the scientists behind it, and then those who benefit from it are almost added as an afterthought. But Ohio State's press release had Ian front and center, and then worked in details about the researchers and the research. And best of all, they provided us with photos and any additional info very quickly. So we were able to get something up on the web very quickly, as well into print. And it was a win-win situation. This research directly impacts the lives of people who have spinal cord injuries, and we are a magazine that focuses on the lives of people who have spinal injuries and other mobility impairments. So again, we covered this issue because there was a compelling press release that presented this breakthrough from the viewpoint of a wheelchair user. Great images were provided, and the media contact was very responsive. I wasn't going to read the bullet points during this presentation, but this one is important enough to do it. These are the 3 things that really can get your work published in relevant publications. Now, you might get the idea from everything that I just said that we are a healthcare-oriented magazine, but we're not. We're a lifestyle magazine, and that means we cover as wide a variety of issues that affect wheelchair users as we can, which does include healthcare, but really it includes just about everything. My own background is in advocacy, and over the years I've taken some heat from activist friends frustrated that we don't do more articles purely from an advocacy perspective. And they wish that we wouldn't focus so much on personal stories and what they call the human interest stuff, and instead focus on the issues that they say really matter. And in fact, we have had to kill profiles on advocates and not run them in the magazine because some advocates decided that their understanding of disability rights is so rigid that they wouldn't answer any personal questions at all, hoping that we'd instead just focus on their issue. But that's not how people work. As people, we need stories to really care and understand about just anything. So on our staff, we realize that lifestyle is, in many ways, hardcore advocacy, where stories focusing on lifestyle are hardcore advocacy because they prove that what we're all working toward together is real and really work. And take this cover image, for example. This is from our October issue, so this is this month's issue, and it's on employment. So this is a real woman with a real disability who really works. You can see she's dressed professionally, she has a briefcase, and some sort of day planner opened up. Her wheelchair is higher end, showing that she's active. And in fact, she's a past Paralympian. And just like many other American workers, she even stopped at Starbucks on her way to work. And in many ways, she's a typical new mobility reader. Once, we had someone write in that we're a bit town and country, and this was meant as an insult. But it made us think. You know, the majority of our community, the broader disability community, is struggling financially, but we depict success, and what business do we really have to do that? But her success is real too, and her success is also part of the disability story that we're telling. Plus, our readers tend to have higher levels of education and employment than many others who have disabilities, and we cheer them on. You know, we're proud of them, and we're proud of our role in supporting and promoting the disability middle class. Because after all of our combined life's work, all of you listening in as well as our staff, is about supporting people who have disabilities to live how they choose. And we do this through real life stories about real people who use wheelchairs. And I love this image. We need a whole lot of real life stories about real people who use wheelchairs to fill up our pages every month. And that's where this image that alludes to Little Shop of Horrors, Carnivorous Plants is from. I like that this image is contemporary, showing all the various platforms that need to be fed these days, where, you know, the tablets and laptops, as well as old-fashioned paper-based press. And I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase, feed the beast, as it refers to media before. The first time I heard it, I was an organizer with a statewide advocacy group, and the reporter training us on how to write better press releases repeated it often. Feed the beast, he said. The beast needs more stories. But then he would go on and shoot down just about every story idea we had. And it was very confusing. What's the story, he'd ask. Well, we have a conference coming up, and we're very proud of our Power Through Knowledge conference in Pennsylvania, and boring, he cut us off. No story there. But now that I'm on the other side of things, I understand what he means better than ever. Stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. They draw us in, and they have protagonists who we come to care about. So, on the one hand, we media folks have all these platforms that need copy more than ever before. But on the other hand, that copy must be entertaining, educational, informing, and interesting to our readers, and tell a story. All of that. And if we have something that's even a little bit marginal, that we're just not quite sure if it's a good fit, it's guaranteed that at least 2 or 3 of us on staff will convene a meeting to discuss if it's right for our readership. And if it's not right, is it worth reworking, or is it even possible to rework? And besides, does it even fit into our budget? And by budget, we usually mean story budget, which is a list of what stories will go into the magazine each month. And this is usually set pretty far in advance, although sometimes it can be flexible. Now, I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about my own personal favorite piece to feed, Facebook and social media in general. My friends and family cannot believe I get paid to go on Facebook and Twitter during the workday. And honestly, I'm pretty lucky. But social media is increasingly important in how we interact with our readers. It helps us to track stories and trends, and to see from what people post and share about what is most important to them. It gives us a picture into the real lives of our readers. So we are active on 3 social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. We're active on Facebook because that's where our readers are, and it's a good fit demographically. We are increasingly active on Twitter, and just since January, we've instituted a Twitter strategy that seems to be working for us, although it still needs some tweaks. And as a general rule, we'll post or share lighter items on Facebook, things that can be read relatively quickly, or that you can tell from the headline exactly what it is, or that may cause an emotional spark in the reader. And we've started placing our news items on Twitter and on more serious things. And there's literature that suggests more cerebral content does better on Twitter and more emotional content does better on Facebook. Although there really aren't very hard rules yet, we find too that we can do serious things on Facebook, but only if it really grabs the reader right away.
Josie, this is Kathleen.
Yes.
Would you like to take a question now, or do you want to keep moving?
Sure.
Okay. Jeff Chaikin is wondering, you're talking about content and even mapping content onto specific channels. Do you keep a balance of tech, research, innovation, human interest, or do you have a set ratio about either in the magazine or, how do you handle that issue?
That's an excellent question. We do have a ratio, actually, and I mean, often it depends on who we can get to be a writer and what issues are hot, but we try to cover something health-related at least once a year. We try to cover travel a few times a year because our readers are very interested in travel. We try to cover research. Our readers are very interested in research and very interested in products. So we will cover products actually just about every month. And in fact, we have a new blog called Gear Crip that just focuses on new product releases. And also we try to have a good mix of profiles. And there actually is a formula. I'm not going to share it because I'm not sure I'm allowed, but you have to have a good balance or readers will get bored. Sometimes we run stories because we say they're good for our readers, even if we know that maybe they won't be that interested. But we try very hard to keep it focused on what our readers like. Does that answer the question?
Definitely, and I just have a follow-up. There are a lot of disability researchers, as you know, participating. Yeah. Are there? And you mentioned that your readers are interested in research. Is there any particular topic or angle that interests them, if you were to parse out that research interest more specifically?
Yeah, I'll try to talk about it a little bit later, but generally our readers want things that can help their lives today. So, of course, like I have multiple sclerosis, and so like everybody else with MS, I read the literature and I keep my eye on the newest advances and stuff like that. And most of our readers have spinal cord injuries, and so they're very interested in the new scientific breakthroughs. But we all know that those things aren't really going to help us personally, for the most part. I mean, there are some exceptions. So what our readers tend to be interested in, and I think what all people with disabilities tend to be interested in, is what can help me now. Like, is there a new technology to make this wheelchair lift work? Is there a new technology to let me, a lot of our readers actually use screen readers and voice recognition programs. What's the newest breakdown on those? I'm not coming up with very exciting examples, but just the things that help the most, like in the home. We do, I used to be a housing specialist in one of my past jobs. So to me, I think of them as we do home modification issues. But from a reader's perspective, I think they're more like home and garden, like how can I have a bathroom that is completely usable, that is aesthetic at the same time, so anything that practically helps the lives of people with disabilities today, we are most interested in. But we're also interested in potential breakthroughs, and I need to know about what people are working on. So even if it's not something that is going to bear fruit today, if I know about it, or somebody else on staff knows about it and we can follow it, then we can find ways to work it into a story and get our readers on board with it.
Okay, great. That's really helpful perspective, because I think sometimes when people think about breaking things out, they think about content topics and not so much research from the perspective of how immediate might its application be. Okay, well, carry on.
Yeah, as practical as possible is always best, but we like the futuristic stuff too. Okay, just to go back to, in relation to the question, this one doesn't make any more sense, but just to pick up a little bit more on what to do and not do on social media, I wanted to share a mistake that I was doing when I first started trying to develop a Twitter strategy. It was last January, where I started thinking every tweet had to have hashtags and little @ signs, and I was tweeting some really incomprehensible stuff. But then I read up on it, and see, I love research. I read research on it and took a quiz in some magazine out there to see if I could guess better than a computer which tweets would be retweeted more often, and I flunked horribly. But I shared it with some of our staff, and they didn't do much better. So I just put this slide up to just make the point that to not get caught up in making things look better, sound better, or fads, but what people want more than anything else in the whole world is to understand what you are saying. So just a clear, easily comprehensible sentence does better than anything cluttered up with symbols and abbreviations. And I also discovered that people following us on Twitter didn't want their feeds cluttered up with a bunch of photographs, which I was surprised by because we're a fairly image-centric magazine. But honestly, our Twitter feed is still a work in progress. Facebook is still outperforming Twitter in a big way for us. We're also active on Pinterest because images are such a huge part of what we do, but it's not doing as well as our other platforms. And if more of our readers migrate over to Google+, we'll have to give that another look. But the general point is it's important to have a social media strategy, and it's important to pick platforms that make the most sense for your brand and for your community. So I've talked about our strategy for pushing our own work, but often we choose and write articles based on something that we ourselves read on the internet or on someone's Facebook page. And increasingly, we're learning to tailor content with social media platforms in mind, which means that there are increasingly more beasts to feed, which means more opportunity for us to push your work out to our readers. See, someone's typing a question. Kathleen, could I read? Can people
Sure,
see what
absolutely.
Bonnie Zink just? Bonnie Zink, who I believe did a workshop specifically on this topic, so has to know more than I do on it, just made the point that Twitter is really an exercise in writing headlines that encourage followers to go to larger content. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm finding. And Amy Varel has noted that she started to use Pinterest as she saw another group use it as a knowledge base with resources. And could I talk more about how we're using Pinterest? For our magazine, we're not using Pinterest very well yet. Right now, we're using it to highlight great images and to highlight some lighter content that we think people who are browsing through Pinterest at night will use. Me personally, I've started using my own personal Pinterest page as a filing cabinet or bulletin board, where actually I have quite a few articles on social media research as I was trying to learn this new element of my job. So everybody uses it differently. And Bonnie Zink, am I just repeating stuff that everybody can see?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Well, why don't I stop that? I apologize.
No, it's helpful. I mean, this is your platform, so if you want to integrate a comment into what you're saying, go for it.
Well, I love this discussion that's happening, and I kind of hope I can get a transcript of it. Bonnie Zink adds Pinterest, Instagram, and other visually based platforms are effective in showing your concepts in action through pictures, graphics, and other visual content, and to have fun with it. Okay, I'm going to continue. Just to keep pounding on the beast metaphor, we have a lot of beasts to feed, and so we're always in need of data, statistics, abstracts, and expert voices. This gets a little bit at an earlier question. Our niche is very, very narrow. So everything we do must be focused on the wheelchair user as well as from a disability perspective. So we have 4 editors, and 3 of us have a physical disability. And our editor, Tim, is paraplegic. Our senior editor, Ian Reuter, is quadriplegic. And although at this time I don't use a wheelchair, I have multiple sclerosis. So all our stories have to get by us first. And we ask each other constantly, is this something that you want to read? And is this something that would help you all the time? And I don't think that we would be as relevant as we are or have the loyal readership we do if our editorial staff was mostly people who don't have disabilities. So there's some quick facts. In addition to most of us on editorial staff being people who live with a physical disability, we're very, very careful to ensure that our stories all come from a strong disability perspective. And so we work hard to have as many voices within our pages as possible. And so we use a lot of freelancers. And all of our freelancers are people with physical disabilities. And almost all use a wheelchair full-time. Additionally, for most stories, we ask that at least 3 wheelchair users be interviewed and that their personal experience be presented. And we get especially excited when we find experts who use wheelchairs because they are able to take the hardcore facts and figures and contextualize them in a personal way that resonates with our readership. And so, of course, we do also interview non-disabled experts for relevant stories, but we work hard to keep the focus on the wheelchair user. And this gives our stories a depth that is missing from most of what we read in the mainstream media, as well as some other disability rights publications, disability related publications, I mean. But at the same time, it's not enough that we have disabilities or that our freelancers have disabilities. Personal stories and anecdotes often require context, as I'm sure all of you know very well, especially the researchers among you. So we need to have writers who are able to find the appropriate facts and figures, and we'll speak to experts who can explain what we're looking at. So it's not enough that one of our freelancers has a disability. She has to be a good writer who can write colloquially. She has to be knowledgeable about the subject she's writing about. Plus, she has to know who the thought leaders are and how to get them to agree to be interviewed. So this is an open, open question. After this conference, it's invitation. If you are a researcher in our field that our readers are interested in, please send me an email or call me often and just talk to me about what you're doing. We need you, as do our writers and our readers. And I see there's another question. From Tom Keating, who asks, in emphasizing wheelchair users, how do we address users with cognitive disabilities who are also wheelchair users? And the truth is, Tom, I don't think we do as good a job with that as with other issues. When we had a column specifically for people with MS, we had to do that quite often, and we did it by presenting research and people sharing tips about how they dealt with it. And we're taking another look at it recently. Our editor's nephew acquired a traumatic brain injury, and our staff has been sitting with him through that experience. And so I think that you can expect some more content over the next couple of years that take a closer look at that. But in general, it's not really our focus. You're welcome. And to move on, as we know, despite there being tremendous progress being made in many areas for people with disabilities, there are still some stubborn obstacles to full inclusion. And our readers know this too. But they don't want shallow articles that simply restate the obvious. They want solutions, and even an imperfect solution is better than nothing. But at the same time, they don't want doom and gloom. And this actually is another difference between being a lifestyle magazine and an advocacy magazine. Where often good advocacy means pointing out how horrible a situation is and then try to channel the outrage that comes from that knowledge into some kind of positive change. But even though our readers want the world to change, they mostly want info on what they can do right now. But this information can be hard to find. Let's take the second slide, for example. I'll just flip back to it. As I said earlier, this image was for our employment Beating the Odds cover package. And in case you're interested, this is Renee Tyree on the cover. And she has a doctorate in pharmacology, and her job is to set up computerized systems for Health South. So she is part of a clinical implementation team that spends 10 weeks at each hospital installing systems and training employees how to use them, and then she moves on to another hospital. So she's one of the lucky ones, whereas she has a full-time job that pays well that's outside of the disability field. But most of the others in the story package work part-time jobs or find ways to get Social Security work with them using the PASS or other tools. And as we know, employment is an issue that affects everyone, and employment of people with disabilities is always abysmally low. And we know that during the Great Recession, it sunk even lower. So it's hard to get a good picture of how employment impacts our readership specifically, because even though there's many sources of statistics, like the census, they tend to lump disability groupings together. So although we did include some statistics in a cover package of articles on employment, mostly we depended upon our own freelancers and readership's knowledge, experience, and wisdom. So it's a solid cover package, and our writers did a great job, but I'm sure at least one of you right now is squirming in your seat because you have information that could have made this package even stronger. But we don't know each other yet, or if we do, we didn't know we could help each other. So this is an example of us needing you to help us gain access to all the latest research on employment and all other issues affecting wheelchair users. And in return, we can help your work into the hands of the people who can directly benefit from it the most. And this slide gets to the question earlier about do we have a ratio. So I broke some of the topics that we covered down the most. So hopefully you're thinking about the information that you have that our readers will be most interested in. And again, please send it to me. We do an awful lot of background reading. But I'd like to explain how we search for info, and hopefully it will spark ideas you have of how we can work together. You remember the Feed the Beast slide? We have columns, blogs, features, cover stories, and then also Twitter and Facebook that all require their own unique, often original content. So each columnist is responsible for her own content collection, and we editors will fact check it as well as we can and often point to the freelancer to a resource or expert. And here's some more issues that we cover. I'll just read them quickly. Travel, sexuality and relationship, health, specifically things like dealing with UTIs and pressure wounds to aging-related secondary conditions. Equipment, transportation, some advocacy, media portrayal of disability, as well as employment and education. So you can see we need you guys, especially if your research deals with any of these issues and other everyday quality of life issues. But don't get discouraged if we don't immediately quote you or cite your research, because we plan our features and cover stories up to a year in advance, although there are sometimes exceptions, and we don't typically accept unsolicited manuscripts. So I thought that I would walk you through our process using one of my own cover packages as an example. That model who's straddling the commercial airliner is Eric Standlee, a photography wizard who also teaches courses at an art school. And he made jokes about hoping his students never see this photo because they tease him too much. And what he did, in case you're interested in, is he took photos of himself straddling the arm of his couch, not an easy feat for a guy who's also paraplegic, and then he photoshopped that image onto a photo of a toy plane, which is kind of brilliant. And you can see in the distance his wheelchair's flying off into the great blue yonder. So again, we're careful to keep the focus of power on a wheelchair user on our covers. And air travel is scary for wheelchair users, and so we try to depict that with this image to be, blunt. It's scary for a reason, but also to focus on the positive, that it can be done and it's worth being done. Hence the title, Taming Our Fear of Flying. Leading up to the story, there had been tremendous buzz among our readers about how awful airlines had been toward them. So we decided we wanted to do a cover package. We couldn't find any recent research or articles on which airlines were better for our community, or even what the flying experience is like for wheelchair users. So we did a huge survey, and over 1,000 readers responded and gave us a very good picture on every detail, from which airlines do the better job, to which seats they prefer, to how long they've been left on the plane, to whether their chair is operable when they get off the plane, and so on. So each story has a budget that we have to stay within. And as you can guess by this piece of art, it kind of went over. And budget, it can mean how much money we can spend on a story, but it also means how many words and pages we can allot. Well, I have components in this package that deal with everything from your rights as a traveler to a roll-through that takes the reader from the parking garage to getting off at her destination. And so I had thought that I covered all the bases for our readers. And then I got an email from Glenn White, who might actually be at this conference. And he's a researcher in Kansas. And he wrote that he saw we were doing a story on flying, and he wanted me to know about the great work he and others with disabilities have been doing with Delta Airlines. Now, the stories were pretty much done. I was out of space and money. But Glenn said all the right things, like, I know your editor, and you can have it for free. And I don't mind if you shorten it, helped as well. And he was very open to negotiating, and so we were able to get him a page, even though it deserved more. But where could I have found that info through web research? Because it didn't come up in any of my searches, or anywhere I looked, or with anyone I spoke to. So my question for all of you to think about is, how can we find your work so that we can incorporate it into our work? And it could be as simple as just getting to know each other so that we know about your area of expertise, and you can learn what kinds of stories our readers expect from us, and work in there. I love the image on this slide because it took me a full minute to get the joke. The sign says, "Do not disturb, tiny grass is sleeping," which is a humorous and poetic mistranslation of "keep off the grass." So we pride ourselves on the quality of our articles, and we consider ourselves crack journalists, researchers, and we're not afraid of medical, scientific, or academic terms. And in fact, it's a big part of our jobs across all of our platforms. We also read studies and articles about studies, and then break that down into easy English for our readers so they have a better understanding of the topic. But first, we have to understand the topic ourselves, and we're not scientists or researchers. We're journalists. And I actually want to say that again because we recognize this about ourselves. We're journalists, we're good at researching, but we're never going to understand science or research as well as someone who actually is a scientist or a researcher. So often, we only know about the studies or research that are passed around by non-scientists like ourselves. And sometimes we'll get hold of a study that's an outlier, and we may not be aware that it's an outlier, and then we might write it up like it's the next big thing, and then get a call after the fact that had happened. It doesn't happen very often because we do have experts that we can speak with or quickly shoot an email to. So usually we can avoid these types of mistakes. But everything in our field changes so quickly that we're always looking for more experts. And just the more we understand about your work, the less likely we are to mistranslate your results. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the ways disability research affects my life as a woman who has MS. And so I thought it would be fun to share this image of me doing one of my favorite things in the world, kayaking on the Susquehanna River, which is less than a mile from my home, and highlight how disability research makes this possible in my own life. Before I knew I had MS, I used a cane daily and a scooter probably a few times a week. I doctor shopped trying to get a diagnosis, but it wasn't until I lost the use of my left eye and most of the use of my right eye that I got my MS diagnosis. And most of my sight returned, which is usually the case with MS, although some days it's pretty bad. But because I didn't know what I had, until the diagnosis, I was not able to connect things like heat management to my ability to walk or function. You know, most of us with MS are very sensitive to heat and lose abilities until we cool off again, which is very annoying. But now that I know what I have and how it affects me, I'm able to manage it much better. But somebody somewhere researched it and discovered that, you know, people like me can exercise safely if we stay cool. And not only that we can, but that it's good for us. So I found out about these studies, and decided if I was careful, I could exercise too. I actually don't use a cane most days now, because now that I know what I have and what my limits are, I know, if it's hot outside, to limit this, or if I'm fatigued or tired, to limit this. And so I'm able to do things like kayaking even. And kayaking is often used as an example of an exercise that people with physical disabilities can do. And so our magazine runs a lot of stories about it. And so I got one myself. So this photo of me in my kayak, to me, is all about adaptive equipment and disability research, especially about cooling, especially about exercise and cooling technology. So not going to work for me. Let's get that. My hat screens out UV rays and is designed to be cooler than most headgear. And I dip it in the water when needed for an evaporative cooling effect. And I can put it down over my eyes to shade them. My light jacket, which I'm not wearing there, is as light as possible since my strength gets affected as I exercise, something I was only able to figure out after I learned I had MS. My shirt is OmniFreeze by Columbia, and it actually is the best cooling technology I've come across because it's very light and it actually works. And my capris are also by Columbia and also are a cooling material. So my kayak is very light for its kind and easy to get in and out of, and I can even usually load it myself. And it has pedals and paddles, so if one half of my body needs a break, the other can take over. And I have a horrible time with light sensitivity from bouts of optic neuritis, so I use transition lenses. Also, the more I kayak, the worse I can see. There's nothing that can help that, though, so just bang off rocks. And even my fishing license, being on a lanyard, is MS-related, where I can't drop it when my hands get weak. And although they're not being shown, I also have a whole bunch of Velcro cuffs and things like that that I wrap around anything that I don't want to lose in the water. So I have to say that if I did not know what my disability is, or have great role models, or access to accurate information, my quality of life would not be as rich as it is. So to those of you who do research, I just wanted to say thank you for what you do, and for helping me to make my life, my quality of life, as well as the quality of life of all the people we all serve, as rich as possible. And thank you. And I have my contact information here if anybody wants to get in contact with me. And I'd like to open it up now for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Josie. You were talking about how you refer your freelancers to experts, and obviously you've got your contact information right there, so anybody online here can perhaps just contact you in the way that Glenn White did. But when it's going the other way, where do you find your experts? Do you have places like what Bonnie Zink is suggesting, a Google author scholar profiles that you would actually review, or how do you get in touch with your experts? How do you know who they are?
What was Bonnie's comment?
Bonnie's comment was that social activity helps researchers get their work found, along with keyword use, search engine optimization techniques, etc. Be sure to fill out your Google Author Scholar profiles completely, too. So she's talking about researchers reaching out to you. But I'm wondering, is there anything that you do systematically or not to, add, to use an old-fashioned term, add to your Rolodex of whom you consider to be experts?
I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that generally, like most people, we stick with the people that we know, and we stick to the people that that are prominent among our own readership base. So it's hard for us to get to know new researchers, obviously. Like, for example, Wise Young to us is considered the greatest guru on SCI research because he's very active on CareCure forums where our readers go, and because he's been a well-known name for a long time. But it makes it a little bit harder to get newer research in the magazine. It's probably not what you want to hear. If I know you and I trust you, then I'll I'm going to find a way to use your work. If I don't know you and just read your work, I'll do unscientific things like see how many citations come up on the web to see if it's real, and then I'll actually call around to see if anybody I know knows you. Very low tech in a way.
It's interesting because what you're saying is very consistent with what CEDL's, also has another Knowledge Translation Center we'll hear from this afternoon, the Knowledge Translation Center on Employment Research, and we did a study about doing outreach to policymakers and policymaking organizations for researchers, and it's a very similar way that people make connections through their professional and social networks. We also had another question come in from Twitter. If you use Facebook and Google+, do you use them in the same way, or does your content and presentation differ?
We don't use Google+ at this time because right now we don't have enough readers using Google+ to make it worth developing strategy. We do use Twitter and Facebook. Up until this past January, we didn't do hardly anything with Twitter at all. We have our Twitter and Facebook accounts linked, so we were doing what the literature says not to do, which is anything that was published on Facebook then became automatically published on Twitter. But once I started looking at our social media platforms, I realized that most people may have all these accounts, but really they will primarily just use one. So we were realizing that we actually have a different core readership base for Twitter than we do for Facebook. So I started tailoring content for each of those platforms, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And do you find for the platforms that are more image-oriented, there's been some conversation in the chat about the use of images, say on Pinterest, and you mentioned that you use a professional photographer, Greg Standlee. Do you think that it is important to have these polished images, or do you sometimes just put up maybe things that look a bit more like snapshots of events or something like that?
Right. For the magazine covers, we almost always use a professional photographer, although sometimes if a subject has a very good image, we're able to get one for free, and then we're very happy. For feature stories, we tend to use photographs that the people in the story share with us, and we try to coax lifestyle photos out of them, meaning just people living their lives. Like if it's a travel story, maybe it would be nice to get some vacation photos from them, photos of them playing with their children, things like that. People like a lot. In terms of specifically the image-based social media platforms, I think that we want to control how nice our images look on those platforms because it's expected of us, and it's kind of part of our identity that we actually don't do as much on Pinterest as we could. And we don't use Instagram for the magazine. But with Facebook, especially, it's not quite the Wild Wild West anymore as it was for a few years, but I'm finding that our readers like sort of a casual approach to Facebook, and that we'll share images on Facebook from other sites that are not as polished as things that we might have in a magazine. Like maybe some of the language will be goofy, like wheelchair bound, or things like that, simply because we know our readers will like it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. We've had some more activity here. I saw, there's a lot of questions here. Okay. So here's another question from Kelly Cloud about Twitter. Is there a certain strategy that should be employed when trying to determine what to retweet from other individuals?
There actually is. And it's the same exact strategy that you should use anyway with anything your organization does. You have to think about what your brand is, and then you have to only share content that fits your brand. So for Twitter and Facebook, we'll be very careful to only post things that we're sure our readers will be interested in from the unique disability perspective of wheelchair users. But it can be broad. Like with Twitter, I participated in this hashtag Disability Solidarity's Twitter conversation on race and disability that came out of Ferguson. And I had to think about it because I was having trouble finding a way to make it fit our readership, but then it's like, well, these are all people with disabilities, and some of these people with disabilities use wheelchairs, and this is an issue that cuts across pretty much everything. And so I participated in the Twitter conversation by respectfully retweeting tweets that others had tweeted. Got to find better language for that. And at first, some people kind of dropped off of our Twitter. They started unfollowing us, and I was very embarrassed. But then at the end, we actually gained something like 100 Twitter followers just because we took a chance and went a little bit outside of what we ordinarily would see our focus being. So the answer is you have to know what your brand is, and everything you do, you have to be able to say how it fits your brand, but at the same time, you want to be flexible and push a little bit when you can.
Okay, and we're coming near the end of the session, so I'm going to combine a few questions that are there in chat. I mean, you've talked about knowing your own brand, and then there's obviously the issue of marketing that brand. So how do you know about, I mean, even though it is, you're saying it's a relatively narrow niche that you're focused on wheelchair users, but how do you know, like, say, you meant in your presentation, you talked about a number of topics that you say your users are interested in, or, you know, if you wanted to reach a subgroup of your readers, like young wheelchair users, how would you know that, well, they're on Tumblr or they're not, or, you know?
Surveys, reader surveys is how we actually will tailor content, and that formula that I wasn't really that willing to share based on different reader surveys that we do. But then also, sometimes we do things that fit our brand, but that most of our readers might not be interested in, simply because we think it's good for someone. Like, I've worked for New Mobility for 14 years, and in all 14 years, the age demographic actually has remained pretty much the same, where most of our readers are between like 30 and 55. And so it seems like some are aging out, or and then some are coming in. So I don't know that we'll ever be a magazine that 20-somethings really love, but still sometimes, you know, we try to do things that we think younger wheelchair users will be interested in, like covering a rap group in July, covering WCMX, which is just the coolest thing. It's using your wheelchair like a skateboard, and covering gaming technology that can be used by extremely high quads. And that's probably the smallest we ever sliced our niche down, because the number of people who are high quads who game is, well, it's pretty tiny, but it was important because nobody else is covering it. And for those folks, you know, we wanted them to know about this new technology that's out there that they could be using in their social life. So, ways to reach younger wheelchair users. We also tried to do this new thing where we invited a bunch of people to be community partners because we decided that we needed to be opened up a little bit more. So we're trying to become closer with people like Rebecca Torres, who is just doing an incredible job with her group Backbones. Again, following some of the chair skaters. You know, just again, finding people and building relationships with them is how we do anything.
Well, it definitely sounds like a strategy that would work for a variety of settings. So we are at the top of the hour now, and we just wanted KTDR to say thank you so much, Josie. We hope that you might be able to stick around for a while more in case there are ongoing questions that you could continue on in the chat. For the now, we're going to break for 10 minutes and then come back to hear Chet Cooper and Leah Martirosyan of Ability Magazine. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.